This book I recently got off eBay for $5,999.99, but we added shipping and all that kind of stuff, eBay fees. It ended up being over $6,000. And some people might be wondering, why would you spend $6,000 on a book, Russell? First off, Neville is one of the most prolific writers from the genre that I like to collect in. He's got a huge cult following. And this edition of the book is actually really cool because first off, it's first edition. But number two, it was actually signed by Neville right here. So it's called The Power of Awareness. And he's got a lot of books in this series. We'll probably do other videos in the future on a lot of them. This is one I want to lead with because it, again, is first edition and signed by Neville. So one of the concepts from this book that I think, and there's so many cool things in here to talk about awareness, being aware of something, right? He talks about, like, most people aren't even, like, they're not conscious of what's happening around them. Like, most of us are living lives, we're just kind of, we're out there, we're bouncing around, and we're just doing whatever it is. We're not even aware of it. Talking about, like, the power, like, when you're able to be aware of, like, this is what's happening, this is why I'm doing things, it changes things. For me, the very first time I had that, I was my very first Tony Robbins event. When everyone's at the event and we're jumping around, and I remember it was the first time, like, I became aware of, like, what I was doing and why I was doing it. And the crazy thing was, like, my whole life I've been doing this. I had these patterns that I was running. I didn't even know. And as soon as I became aware of the pattern, I was able to stop back and be like, wow, I keep doing the same thing over and over again. And when I was aware of it, then I could change it. But prior, I couldn't. It was all invisible to me, right? And I think about, like, probably one of the greatest gifts I got from Tony Robbins was being aware of the patterns that I was in, right? And a lot of this book is about that, like, the power of awareness. When you're aware of something, then you can stop it and you can change it. Versus most people are just drifting. They're living their life. They're not even aware of, like, of the things that they're actually doing, right? One of the other really powerful things that I learned from Neville in this book he talks about, but also in other books I've read from him that was really powerful. He said the key to transformation is to think about the thing you want as if it's already happened, right? And it's not like, I think sometimes you see this in, the self-help gurus where, like, if you want to be rich, just tell people you're rich. And that's not what I'm talking about here. In fact, I have a really cool example in my own life. Over the last, 2.5 years, I've really struggled to sleep at nights. I've had sleep issues. And the reason that I have so many projects I'm working on, stress and anxiety, the business and chaos with kids and all this stuff. And so what happened, I go to bed at night. And as I'm going to bed at night, I start thinking about the obstacles, right? Like I'll be falling asleep and also think about one obstacle in my way, right? Also I think about that, I'm like, oh, so my brain starts trying to figure out how to solve that. And I'm trying to think about that. Also, the next obstacle pops up, another one. And soon I'm stressing about 12 different projects and I can't sleep at night. Next thing you know, it's 5 a.m, my alarm clock's going off. I haven't slept yet. And it's like, I really struggled that a long time. And then I started 75 Hard about 40 days ago. And I was reading a Neville Goddard book. And in there, he talked about before you go to bed at night, he's like, don't focus on the obstacles in your head. He said, instead, visualize the end state of what you want to accomplish, what you're working towards. He says, if you do that, a couple things will happen. Number one, you'll be able to fall asleep better, which I was like, oh, thank heavens, I could use that right now in my life. But number two, he said, when you do that, he's like, your subconscious mind, if you visualize where you're trying to get to, your subconscious mind, when you're sleeping, will figure out all the things to answer and then be able to solve that problem. He said, when you're stressing about and thinking about the problems you have, your brain will, like, make those problems bigger, which is why you can't sleep at night. But if you visualize the end state, so for me, for example, what I was doing right now, a lot of you guys probably know, like right now I'm in my makeshift version of my vault. I am building a 20,000 square foot museum for my books, my magazines, my manuscripts, and everything, right? And this has been a big project the last 2 or 3 years. And so for me, I was, like, stressing about all the details of everything. And I remember stopping after reading this from Neville. And I said, okay, tonight when I go to bed, I'm just going to think about the end state. So I pictured myself, like, in the museum event center. I picture myself on stage with, like, my inner circle members in there. I'm teaching them stuff and we're having a great time. And I visualize myself, like, in the room with the books, like sitting down researching and writing my next book, and, like, the end state of the angle that I'm racing towards, right? And I remember I did that the first night, and within 5 minutes I was out cold. And the next day I was like, I slept great last night, right? And then the next day I said, when I go to bed tonight, I'm going to visualize the end state, right? And then fell asleep. So I was falling asleep really good. But then the next byproduct, which is crazy, is just like he said, like, your subconscious mind will figure out ways to solve these problems as you're sleeping. And when you're not in, like, conscious, like, try to solve the problem zone, right? It's so crazy because, like, over the next 30-day window, like, all these, like, answers to the problems that for me to solve to the big division I was working towards started showing up in weird ways, where, like, all of a sudden, like, an idea, a person's head would pop in mind, or a different situation, or, like, these things would just come into my mind and they were the answer to how to solve the problems. And so I don't know, maybe it's woo-woo, maybe it's super magic, I don't know. But two things it did for me is, number one, make me sleep better at night, which was a huge blessing. Number two, it's getting me closer to the thing I've been visualizing. And it's funny because I hadn't done that for so long, but when I think back, like my athletic career as a kid, every night I went to bed and I visualized me as a state champion getting my hand raised. Like that was something every night I would think about. When I got to college, I started thinking about the same thing with like my goals there. And I'd forgotten about it. Like in athletics and sports, I think a lot of times we talk about visualization. We hear about, like basketball, like they did tests where Maxwell Maltz did tests where they had basketball players who actually shot like 1,000 free throws, and then basketball players at night were like in their head practice 1,000 free throws. And both groups increased their scoring percentage by the same amount, whether they were doing it actually or just like visualizing it. And so a lot of times in athletics, they look at tests like that and talk about athletes, like visualize yourself doing the thing. And but we don't talk about it in business, right? At least I never hear people talking about it. And I think a lot of us business people think that's too woo-woo for us. I'm not going to try it. But if it wasn't for someone like Neville, who I respect him as a writer and as an author, as someone who still has a huge cult following online today, I wouldn't have tried it. And so far for me, it's been great. So there's your homework assignment for tonight. Visualize the end state of the thing you're trying to accomplish. And see, number one, if it helps you sleep better at night. And number two, see if you do that consistently over time, if the answers to the problems you're trying to solve will start magically showing up. Who knows? All right, so if you guys want to get a copy of my notes from The Power of Awareness by Neville Goddard, click a link in the description down below. That'll take you to a page where you can get a copy of my notes. That way you can see the highlights of this book. And if it inspires you to want to actually read it, which hopefully it will, there's a link down below. We have an Amazon store set up with this book plus all the books we're talking about here on the channel. You can get a copy of The Power of Awareness there as well. And with that said, I enjoyed hanging out with you guys today. I hope you got a lot of value. Hopefully you understand and you remember that readers are leaders. You guys should read more books. I appreciate you, and I will see you guys on the next video.